Founded in 1923, Finnair is one of the world's oldest continuously operating airlines and one of Europe's most innovative. Starting with a single Junkers F-13 floatplane connecting Helsinki and Tallinn, Finnair has grown into a global network connecting Europe, Asia, and North America. Over the decades, Finnair pioneered transpolar routes to Asia, becoming the first European airline to operate the Airbus A350, and has built a reputation for safety, reliability, and excellent service by Nordic standards. Today, Helsinki Airport serves as Finnair's strategic hub, offering some of the shortest transit times between East and West. Sustainability is now central to the airline's mission. Finnair has committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2045, investing heavily in next-generation aircraft and sustainable aviation fuel. Don't forget to like, share, and comment so you don't miss our other videos. Finnair, originally known as Aero Oy, was established on November 1, 1923 in Helsinki by entrepreneur Bruno Lukander, with financial and technical support from the German aircraft manufacturer Junkers. The partnership reflected a pragmatic start. Junkers provided capital and aircraft, while Lukander ensured local organization and government backing. Aero's first aircraft, a Junkers F-13 floatplane, began operations in March 1924 on the Helsinki-Tallinn route, carrying both passengers and mail across the Gulf of Finland. This short but significant international link marked the beginning of Finland's commercial aviation industry. Through the 1920s, Aero expanded modestly. The company relied on floatplanes due to Finland's limited airport infrastructure, connecting isolated communities and small Baltic cities like Stockholm and Reval. Aviation in Finland was still viewed as experimental, but Aero's role in transporting mail, perishables, and business travelers quickly established its value. In the 1930s, Aero upgraded its fleet with more capable Junkers and Douglas aircraft, allowing longer flights and improved reliability. Still, the airline's growth remained constrained by Finland's relatively small population and peripheral geography. Aero primarily focused on building regular domestic services to connect remote areas of the country with Helsinki. Despite limited scale, the airline gained symbolic importance as Finland sought to modernize its transportation and integrate with the wider European network. World War II brought major disruption. Civilian air traffic was heavily restricted, and Aero redirected much of its operation to support Finland's wartime logistics. Flights concentrated on domestic and regional missions, often under dangerous conditions, including supply runs and essential communications. International operations were largely suspended. Following the war, the Finnish state recognized the strategic value of aviation in rebuilding and securing international connections. In 1946, the government took majority ownership of Aero, transforming it into a nationalized carrier and cementing its role as Finland's flag airline. This intervention stabilized Aero, financially and strategically, enabling it to prepare for the next phase: modernization, international expansion, and eventually rebranding as Finnair in the post-war years. By the late 1940s, Aero had survived its fragile beginnings and wartime challenges to emerge as a symbol of national resilience. The foundations were now set for the airline to evolve from a small Nordic pioneer into one of Europe's recognized international carriers. By the early 1950s, Aero Oy officially rebranded as Finnair, strengthening its national identity. The airline expanded its fleet with Douglas DC-3s and Convair 440 Metropolitans, and in 1954 it inaugurated service to London, establishing its first major Western European route. A defining moment came in 1960 when Finnair introduced the Sud Aviation Caravelle, becoming one of the first European carriers to embrace jet technology. However, the early jet era was also marked by tragedy. On January 3, 1961, Aero Flight 311, a Douglas DC-3 from Kronoby to Vasa, crashed on approach after both engines stalled. All 25 passengers and crew were killed. Investigators determined that both pilots were intoxicated and severely fatigued, making human error the primary cause. This remains the deadliest aviation accident in Finnish history. Despite the setback, Finnair pressed forward with modernization. The acquisition of Douglas DC-8s allowed it to inaugurate its first transatlantic service to New York in 1969, directly connecting Finland to the U.S. market. The 1970s and 1980s were defined by Finnair's bold Asia strategy. In 1976, the airline inaugurated non-stop flights to Bangkok, capitalizing on Finland's geographic advantage as the shortest air bridge between Western Europe and Asia. This Asia-focused expansion became a defining hallmark of Finnair's network. The airline's pioneering spirit culminated in 1983, when it became the first Western European carrier to operate non-stop flights to Tokyo. Using a polar route over the North Pole, Finnair cut flying time and underscored its role as a bridge between East and West. Building on this success, Finnair launched non-stop service to Beijing in 1988, once again ahead of most of its European competitors. These moves reinforced Helsinki's status as a strategic transit hub, offering some of the fastest one-stop connections between Europe and Asia. By the end of the 1980s, Finnair had transformed from a modest Nordic regional operator into a globally recognized connector, linking Europe, North America, and Asia. Its reputation for innovation, efficiency, and geographic advantage was firmly established principles that continue to shape its strategy in the 21st century. The 1990s marked a decisive modernization phase for Finnair. In 1992, it launched its Finnair Plus loyalty program, laying the groundwork for customer retention in an increasingly competitive global market. Just 3 years later, in 1995, Finnair became one of the first airlines in the world to offer online booking, showcasing its early adoption of digital innovation. Simultaneously, the fleet underwent renewal. Older DC-8s and DC-10s were gradually retired, replaced by more efficient Airbus A320, family aircraft for European services, and McDonnell Douglas MD-11s for long-haul routes. These steps modernized operations while improving passenger experience. A watershed moment came in 1999, when Finnair joined the One World Alliance alongside British Airways, American Airlines, Cathay Pacific, and Qantas. Membership gave the carrier an extended global network through code sharing, aligning it with top-tier airlines and enhancing its competitiveness. This step also reflected Finland's deeper integration into the European Union, which it had joined in 1995, and positioned Finnair as a global player rather than a purely regional airline. During the 2000s, Finnair executed a clear strategic pivot toward Asia, capitalizing on Helsinki's geographic advantage as the shortest gateway between Western Europe and East Asia. By 2007, Asia accounted for more than half of Finnair's long-haul revenue, with routes to Tokyo, Beijing, Bangkok, Shanghai, and Hong Kong forming the backbone of its growth. The network expansion reinforced Vanta's role as a fast, efficient transit hub. To secure future competitiveness, in 2005, Finnair became one of the launch customers for the Airbus A350X WB, signaling its long-term commitment to efficiency, passenger comfort, and sustainability. This order underscored its ambition to maintain an advanced fleet while sustaining its leadership on the Europe-Asia corridor. By the close of the decade, Finnair had evolved into a digitally innovative, alliance-connected, Asia-focused carrier, bridging continents with a clear strategic identity. The 2010s marked a decade of both expansion and restructuring for Finnair. After years of financial strain in the early part of the decade, management introduced a cost-cutting program between 2011 and 2015 that reduced headcount, streamlined operations, and renegotiated supplier agreements. This reset created a leaner cost base, allowing the airline to stabilize and prepare for future growth. A pivotal milestone came in October 2015 when Finnair became the first European airline to operate the Airbus A350-900. The aircraft, known for its efficiency and reduced emissions, enabled Finnair to sharpen its Asia-focused strategy. With the A350, the carrier launched or reinforced long-haul services to key Asian hubs such as Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Bangkok. These investments solidified Helsinki's role as one of the fastest and most efficient gateways linking Europe with Asia, a niche that became central to Finnair's identity in global aviation. The progress unraveled abruptly with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. International air travel collapsed, forcing Finnair to ground most of its fleet and suspend the majority of passenger services. Passenger volumes fell by over 90%, leaving cargo operations as the airline's primary revenue stream. Finnair quickly adapted by converting passenger aircraft for cargo-only flights and expanding freight services to sustain cash flow. The Finnish government stepped in with extensive financial support, while the airline itself raised more than 500 million euros in equity to stabilize its balance sheet. These measures prevented collapse, but highlighted the severity of the crisis. Recovery began in earnest by 2022, as global borders gradually reopened. Finnair restored its European and Asian services, while also expanding across the Atlantic with new routes to Dallas, Fort Worth, and Seattle. In Asia, routes to Tokyo, Osaka, Seoul, and Hong Kong returned as restrictions lifted, restoring the airline's key geographic advantage. By 2023, Finnair had repositioned itself with a diversified long-haul network spanning Europe, Asia, and North America. Supported by its modern Airbus fleet and a leaner cost structure, the airline emerged from the pandemic more resilient, ready to reassert its role as Northern Europe's bridge between continents. Since 2022, the closure of Russian airspace has deeply impacted Finnair's core strategy. For decades, the airline built its business model on offering the fastest connections between Europe and Asia via Helsinki. With Russian skies closed, routes to Japan, Korea, and China became up to 40% longer, adding thousands of kilometers and hours of flight time. This eroded Finnair's cost advantage, raised fuel and crew expenses, and forced the suspension of several Asian routes that were no longer viable. In response, Finnair shifted focus toward North America, India, and the Middle East, while maintaining a strong European network. The airline's leadership has acknowledged that Russian airspace may remain closed for years, treating it as a permanent operating condition. Though the disruption weakened Finnair's Asia-centric model, it also spurred strategic diversification, ensuring the carrier adapts and sustains its role as a resilient Northern European hub. As of 2025, Finnair maintains a streamlined fleet of roughly 80 aircraft, composed almost entirely of Airbus models. On short and medium-haul routes, the airline deploys Airbus, A319s, A320s, and A321s, ensuring consistency and efficiency across its European network. For long-haul operations, Finnair relies on a mix of Airbus, A330-300s, and next-generation Airbus A350-900s. The A350s in particular form the backbone of Finnair's Asia, Europe, and transatlantic strategy, offering significant reductions in fuel burn and emissions. With an average age of under 10 years, the fleet is one of the youngest and most fuel-efficient in Europe, aligning with the company's long-term focus on cost, discipline, and environmental performance. Sustainability sits at the core of Finnair's strategic vision. The airline has pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2045, ahead of many industry peers, and has set ambitious interim goals for 2030. These include cutting emissions per passenger kilometer by 50% from 2019 levels. To meet these targets, Finnair is actively investing in sustainable aviation fuels, SAF, expanding carbon offset programs, and optimizing operational efficiency. Partnerships with energy providers in the Nordic region aim to build a more reliable SAF supply chain, while Finnair is also participating in research into next-generation propulsion technologies. Its sustainability efforts extend to ground operations and customer initiatives, such as reduced single-use plastics and enhanced recycling on board. Passenger traffic has rebounded strongly post-pandemic, with 11 to 12 million travelers carried in 2024, approaching pre-COVID volumes. Finnair now serves 80 destinations in over 35 countries, maintaining its dual emphasis on Europe-Asia corridors and growing transatlantic connectivity. Its Helsinki hub remains the cornerstone of the strategy, offering fast transfer times between Western Europe, North America, and East Asia. Despite disruptions from geopolitical tensions, notably restricted Russian airspace, Finnair has diversified by expanding westward into North America and adding new Southern Asia links to balance its network. With over a century of history, Finnair has evolved from a single Junkers F-13 floatplane in 1923 to a modern, globally connected airline. Its pioneering spirit was evident early on, from launching polar routes to Asia in the 1980s to becoming the first European operator of the Airbus, A350 in 2015. Over decades, Finnair has weathered wars, economic downturns, and the COVID-19 pandemic, consistently adapting through innovation and disciplined management. By 2025, the airline positions itself as a specialist connector between Europe, Asia, and North America, leveraging Helsinki's hub as a geographic advantage. Membership in the One World Alliance amplifies its reach, while a young Airbus fleet enhances both efficiency and customer experience. True to its Nordic roots, Finnair has placed sustainability at the heart of its strategy, targeting net zero carbon emissions by 2045. Today, it stands as both a custodian of Finnish aviation heritage and a forward-looking leader in global air travel.